Hey, ladies, welcome to another episode of the Revitalized Womanhood podcast. I'm so excited for this episode. I think we are going to run the whole gambit of emotions in this episode. And I'd like to welcome my guest, Whitney Lynn Allen Gadecky. We were just talking about how to pronounce this, Gadecky, because we've got Whitney is a 2-time author and a grief coach for widows. She has been through the ringer with her story, and I'm so excited to get into your journey because everybody doesn't turn around and do what you're doing for others. Like not everybody says, "Oh, I just lost somebody. I'm going to try to help others through this." Why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself before we jump in?
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. And yes, my name is Whitney Allen Gadecky. Now I just recently got remarried in January. No, it's a mouthful, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to lose any of my name.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, so we just added the new last name. But like Gina said, I'm a widow. Um, I am a lawyer, but I no longer practice. And right now, and for the past 3 years, I've been a full-time grief coach, and author, helping grievers, many who are widows, through the grief process after they go through a significant life-altering loss. I'm also a mom of 2 boys, they're 7 and 3, so life is super busy. Um, and my second book is coming out next month, so it's just a lot going on.
And they can pre-order it right now, right?
Yes, pre-order right
Like
now.
at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, all the things. Yeah.
And it's called What Must Be Carried.
Correct. Yes.
I am so excited. And you also have, well, we're just going to jump right into this pitch. You also have a freebie. You're giving away your first book free with the pre-order of this second book. That's amazing.
I am. I really just, my community has been so amazing. Just supporting me through just the beginning of starting my business and my being an author. So I really wanted to give them something special. So I'll be signing all of those books for them, sending those out for free. If they pre-order my second book, What Must Be Carried.
Okay, I'm totally going. And I said this, I reached out and says, "Oh my gosh, why didn't I get your books first?" And I probably had thought to myself to do it, but then I, had a baby and all goes out the window. But I'm going to do this. So, ladies, her first book is best title ever, called Running in Trauma Stilettos. And that's the free copy you're going to get if you pre-order What Must Be Carried. So we're going to put all the links in the show notes and everything. So we have everything for everybody ready to go.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Tell us, we got to just start at the start, right? We got to begin at the beginning. Yeah. And that video you just posted on your Instagram had me, okay. Like, of course, it had me exactly where you think it would. That was like such an amazing video. And he's like, the love of my life. And tell me about that day. What happened?
Yeah. So the video you're referring to, my husband, Ryan, he was a canine officer, and he was on like just a random day off in the middle of the week, and he was playing with his dog Louie, and I was working out. And it's a video him saying like, the love of my life. There she goes. And he was really funny and silly, and I didn't know he was taking that video. And I found that video on his phone after he had sustained an anoxic brain injury from a random bee sting, not even knowing he was allergic to bees. And he took that video on that day. So it was a few hours later. So it was actually like, I don't even remember, because he went to the gym after that video. And then when he got home is when he got a bee sting on the way home from the gym. And that was the last time we spoke. So I think, I don't even know if I said, I don't even know if we had another conversation after like saying goodbye when I went off and finished my workout and he went to the gym. I can't even remember. So that I think that was our last I love you, even though I wasn't there.
It's brutal thinking about that, because that is such a random. I mean, and you think about that, just another day, right? And like I said, I have questions here and I prepared them specifically because A, I figured the hormones would get me. And B, I figured the mom brain would get me. And this is
Yeah.
such, I really want this episode to be beautiful and for the women that need to hear it. So losing your husband so tragically is an experience that none of us can imagine. None of us even want to imagine. Right?
No.
What emotions were you navigating and what kept you moving forward even when it felt impossible?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's also it's so complex because when something like that happens that it's just like a tragedy, you're flown into fight or flight. So that experience is like you're disassociated, so people don't really know what that means. It's kind of like that feeling where you're out of your body, like you're not really fully embodied in yourself. You're going through the motion, but you really don't feel connected to yourself. Like you're watching a movie of yourself from above, if anyone had experienced that, and you're in shock, right? Like, oh no, this isn't like I'm dreaming, right? Like you're kind of in like a dream state, numb, obviously devastated at the same time. So you're kind of like going back and forth between all of these really intense emotions, like devastation, then numb, then angry, then you're in denial, and then you're disassociated. So it's all of these things all at once, like in the very acute stage right after something happens. Um, and then of course, like anything in life, no emotion is forever. And after, so kind of, if people don't know my story, so my husband Ryan sustained an anoxic brain injury from a beef thing. They were able to get his heart started, but it caused a very severe brain injury. So he was alive for 6 months after his medical event. Um, and then when we were told via brain scans that they did around the 5-month mark after his accident, they told us there's no way he could live a meaningful life. So there were parts of his brain that made him a person and like made him all of the great things that we're able to do, like talk and feel and have emotions and interact. Those were not there anymore. So they told us that. And with that information, I made the decision along with Ryan's family to put him on a hospice and withdraw all life-sustaining care because he was in a vegetative state. So he couldn't eat by himself. He couldn't even swallow. He couldn't interact. Like he had no idea what was happening around him. He couldn't move. Like he couldn't even move his limbs. The most he could do is respond to pain. So very basic. I mean, more basic than a newborn child that can interact and eat and breathe and all these things. Um, so I knew in my heart that is not how he would want to continue his life, like the rest of his life. Because you're there, you're physically there, but you're not really living. So he passed away on April 7th of 2022. And that's when, the emotion transformed from that time because you really do have to decide, how do I move forward from this? So after that, I'm transitioning out of the shock and disassociated state. And then, there's a lot of other difficult emotions like anger that comes up and confusion and you're fearful about what the future holds. So you're having to kind of manage all of those emotions and figuring out how to cope with them and handle them in a healthy, supportive way. But for me, I was really motivated to turn my pain into something that meant something really powerful because I know that's what Ryan would have wanted for me. He wouldn't have wanted the pain to completely consume me and destroy our family. So like me and my boys.
Yeah, at the time you had 2 children. And how young was your youngest? What ages were they when this was happening? Because I saw a video with a baby. He had a baby on his lap, right?
Yeah, so I was 26 weeks pregnant when everything happened, and I had my son Leo when Ryan was still in the hospital, and Ryan died when Leo was around 4 months old.
Okay, so we were talking before we pushed record about your second being much harder. And hi, absolutely, you had to go through that without your your partner and without your support system and while thinking, is he ever going to meet this baby? Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm not trying to dredge things up for you.
No, it's
I'm
okay.
trying to help create a picture for anybody listening, which that's I just went through it, right? I just went through it. I have a 3-week-old. I just went through it, and I can't imagine what you were going through in those moments. So
Yeah, thank you.
that absolutely makes sense to me. Your body holds trauma, and that's what could have been making that second baby so much harder. That second delivery. I'm sorry. So I want to talk to you about in these moments when I'm going to take this down a different road here, because I know a lot of women that not even are dealing with the loss of somebody, but dealing with maybe they're a medical mama. I have a friend in Paris that she's a medical mama, and she spent the better part of 4 years with her son in hospitals, taking care of him. And right now, I'm hearing this person I have in my mind, because this month we're working on loving ourselves. This is the month of love, but focusing it on ourselves. And women, just in generalizations, don't do that. Don't do that, right? We put it into everybody else. We put everything into everyone else. And I have this woman that I'm thinking about that she's got some family members that are in the hospital, and she's putting herself through the ringer of abandonment of her own self-care, because she feels obligated to be loving on her family members in the hospital. And it's like, that is the worst possible thing you can be doing to yourself. So did you see the benefits of taking care of yourself in these times? You had 6 months of back and forth to hospitals, doing whatever different kinds of treatments, all of this hope, all of this, I'm picturing you in this mode of, what's next? We're going to do it. Okay, now what do we need to do? Okay, let's do his PT. Let's keep his muscles from atrophying. You get in this mode of do. Did you have the capabilities of recognizing that self-care was a very important part of this? Because you're also a mom.
No, you're so right. Like, all of that is so correct. And in that very acute stage where, Ryan was in the hospital and we were having to deal, like you said, like, we're having to deal with medical providers and all of these meetings and literally physically going to the hospital, which was like 45 minutes to an hour away, and he kind of shuffled all over. And it was also having to deal with having a newborn baby. So when I say there was like no time for self-care, there was like no self-care, because that was the season I was in. Did I even were there times where I like felt sorry for myself, because I was like, I am so drained and so tired and so out of capacity that I don't even know if I can get out of bed. And I'm like, I just need, I honestly was like, I just want to go to the emergency room so somebody can take care of me, because that's how tired I was. And like, that's a real thought. Like that, I was like, I'm just going to make up something and go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
That's how burnout I was. But that was the season I was in. And then, once Ryan died, I felt like it was, I was obviously so devastated, but so many things can be true at once. And I was so relieved for him that he was no longer suffering, because seeing somebody go from the most capable father and husband, somebody that like started like at the K9 unit at his apartment and was so full of life, go from that to somebody that you don't even physically even recognize anymore, and you see them in pain, and you go from being a wife to a caregiver, almost like you're like their mother, which is such a weird dynamic when it's your husband. It's devastating. Like, it is the most pain I've ever felt, is like that dichotomy between like your life, like your lives, because it's 2 separate lives. It's like the before and the after. And I was relieved when he was able to transition, because I knew that he wouldn't be in pain anymore. And then I also knew at that point I had done everything I could for him. Yeah. And there was nothing else to be done. And I knew that I had to focus on me, because if I didn't, I would lose myself, and then I would lose my kids. Like, not physically, but like
Right.
I wouldn't be able to mother them. And if I couldn't do that, like, that's my legacy, right? Like, my kids are my legacy. And then that would be the worst thing I could do for Ryan's honor, is to let something bad happen to my kids, like emotionally, and not be there for them. So that is what drove me to like get out of bed every day, was like, I need to be there for them. But then I also need to be there for myself, because I can't be there for them if I'm not there for myself. So I had to become my own like best friend and like mother her to
Your advocate.
yes, like so much so it was like it was like so selfish, but in like the best way. Like I knew I had to just lean into me, because that was the only way I'd be able to survive.
And so do you coach that with these women now? Do you, because of course you're going to get pushback, just like you just said.
Yeah.
This is a season. I'm in this. This is you. And they can't say you don't understand to you. You
Right.
understand. But being able to see it from the outside is so much easier to say. And you can say things a billion times to people until they realize it for themselves. It's not going to, it's not going to land anywhere.
Mhm.
But is that part of what you coach now as well? Well, I guess I should say, do you have women who are in your coaching that are going through state where they're in between? They're not dead yet. They're not widows yet.
Yeah.
As well as it is important for these widows to maintain this self-care and this selfishness.
Yeah. And to answer your question, I do work with those that are in that anticipatory grief stage. So somebody is not like physically dead, but they,
Wow. Yeah.
they're going, they might be on hospice, or they have very complicated medical things going on that are terminal, or whatever that situation is. And depending upon the situation, because it was 6 months. So that's like a very intense short period, but some people have to cope and manage for years in that liminal period, right? Um, and even then, like especially when it's longer, you have to find time for yourself. And I say like the reason I'm a lot different than some people that coach or other therapists or counselors is like I bring the tough love, because I know what it takes and what grit it takes to pull yourself out of the darkness. Like it takes everything. And if you don't have that grit, you are not going to be able to pull yourself out of it.
Yeah. And if you're not your own champion, like you said, if you're not advocating for yourself, no one else is going to. Even if people are trying to, like I just said, if you're not willing to do it for yourself, no one else can do it for you.
No,
So that brings me to, I love that you said so many things can be true at once, because that is like the line that should go with any kind of grief or loss or trauma, because we feel so awkward, like it's a supposed to, like you're supposed to grieve this way, or you're supposed to be sad for this long, or you're supposed to. And this isn't just for loss. This is for anything that's happened, a divorce, anything that's low in your life. Two things can exist at the same time, but we don't feel that way. We feel like I'm not going to take the words out of your mouth. I'm talking for me, but I'm going to let you answer. You feel like, did you ever feel like, oh, I can't be happy. I'm supposed to be in mourning. I can't laugh. I'm dishonoring his memory if I'm happy and laughing. Like, did you ever go through that?
Yeah. Those are really good questions. And the answer is, it feels strange to be a widow. It does feel, especially a young widow, when my like Ryan's accident and like his death, it was so public, like his story went viral on social media. So it was like people knew my story. Like I could go out to Starbucks and like somebody would recognize me. A lot of the time, like just going out especially in the community, because it was so local, like everybody knew. And it really did feel like there's a spotlight on you kind of. And so it wasn't that I grappled with feeling guilt for, trying to move forward and finding happiness, but it was more of the realization, like, do other people feel like it's weird that I'm smiling? And
Which you shouldn't even care about at all. ever.
Right. Which
But
why am I thinking about that? But that was a thought that I was having. And that was kind of one of the catalysts for me sharing this experience online is like, I know that they don't get it. And I felt very compelled to teach people like, no, this is how grief is. And this is how life is with grief. And it doesn't look what most people imagine or what we see in like movies or even some books sometimes that really don't capture what the experience is really like, which is that there is a spectrum of human experiences that you have while grieving. And some of those are happiness and joy and laughter and like love and all of these really positive things, along with all of the other stuff that are really hard.
Plus, you've got these two beautiful boys.
Right.
And you don't want them to only know grief and sadness. You want them to be happy. And their memories, unfortunately, are so limited. Your new one, none. But it's got to remind them and got to be able to talk. You have to be able to talk about these things. I'm going to ask you your experience. I have not, thankfully, experienced other than a grandpa that's lived a full life, grandparents, But my mother-in-law lost her husband tragically at 27, and she was pregnant, similar as you. She was pregnant with my husband, their third baby. And it was out of nowhere, an aneurysm spread to his brain or his sinus infection, spread to his brain, and aneurysm. So all I have from that is her talking about what her experiences were, right? And she talks about Rick, her husband, all the time. She talked about him all the time. My husband and his siblings were raised knowing things about their dad, and her new husband is completely supportive of her, talking about him. And she, everybody realizes this is a part of your life. This is something that it's not just something that disappears. And even if you hadn't had kids with him, it's not something that just disappears. This is someone that's made a mark on you. He's been here. He had an impact. So how did that play out in your home with your boys?
Yeah. And you're so right. Somebody that comes into your life, especially a spouse that's like your spouse Ryan and I were together for a decade, right? Like that is part of your story. That's an imprint on your soul. Like you will never, like they will always be a part of who you've become. And that's why it's so important to like continue their legacy because, grievers want to talk about their person. Like it's because it's part of them. It's like you can't talk about your past a lot of the time without them being intertwined with those stories. And they're part of your identity. Right. And in terms of like with my boys, I always follow their lead. I mean, we have in our home now, because I did move from the home that Ryan and I shared to a home that I share now with my new husband, Anthony. But we have pictures everywhere. The boys specifically have like a lot of pictures of Ryan, especially Jackson has pictures of them together. And Leo has like engagement photos of me and Ryan. And then a picture of Ryan in his uniform above his changing table. So he's an ever-present entity in our home, even though he's not physically here. And we talk about him when, we want to talk about him and it becomes relevant to our world. Just like things would come up in normal conversation about people that are here, right? Like, Daddy Ryan loves spaghetti. Like if we're eating spaghetti, it's a very authentic, holistic, like it just flows in our daily lives. Like it's not forced. He's just present, ever present in a very beautiful way.
Yeah. We have our reasons for, and I'm sure I absolutely have no doubt that because my husband lost his dad before he was born and that it was part of their story, right? That Rick died, is that he has just like embraced the one life so lived. That is actually his Instagram handle. And that's how we live. That is absolutely how we live. We've traveled the better part of 8 years over 68 countries with our kids. We're not the 9 to 5 type people because of this fear. Like when we left, we had lost everything, and it took us 6 years to get back to where we felt we could leave. And when we left, we were back to making the most money we'd ever made. And Rick actually even said, it's enough. We don't need to keep going. It's enough. Let's go. We need to go make memories. We don't know how much time we have, right? And I think that I've said it before, and I think that is such a blessing that people like you who have experienced this kind of loss have the ability to embrace that actual concept that you don't know how much time you have. How does that play into how you're raising your boys and how you're living with your new husband?
Yeah, in so many significant ways, because it's one thing to, before you go through a significant loss, like, you might understand, yeah, hypothetically, like, okay, I'm not going to be here forever, right? Like, but you truly don't feel that until, or at least I didn't really feel that in my soul until I lost Ryan. Like, oh no, life is really short and it's really fragile, and it can be taken in like a split second, and your life can completely change. And once you've been through that, you can't live life the same ever again. So for me, I was a practicing attorney before Ryan's accident, and I never went back to the office after Ryan's accident, and I started my business because I felt like life is really short, and I feel this calling in my heart to help others, and like, this is the time to do it. And this is why I'm here on this earth. So I think people that are just waiting to follow their dreams and follow their hearts or write the book or tell somebody how they feel, like, you don't, everyone thinks they go around thinking they have so much time, and like, that's a fallacy. That isn't reality. We don't have so much time. And
Right.
you don't know how much time you have.
And it might not even be, we talk about too, it might not even be like till you're dead. But what if you get in a car accident and you lose the ability to walk? What if it limits, obviously that doesn't like ruin your life, but it limits what you can do, or it definitely puts a damper on, I now can't just walk down to the beach. I can't just jump on a train, or, it makes things more complicated and having to think about these things. It's amazing to me that people are so flippant with the concept of, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll just put it off for another couple years. It's like, what if you're not here in a couple years?
I know.
Does that not affect you? Does that not affect anybody at all? And I think, and like I said, I have had experiences, and there's reasons for why we live the way we do, but I haven't lost anybody, and I still feel it. I still feel that I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time with my husband. I don't have enough time with my kids, even if it's a full life. Even if I get onto my deathbed and I say, I've done it all, I won't say I've done it all, because I will still want more. So it makes me so sad for the people who aren't getting that. I just want to like shake them.
Yeah. You're exactly right, because no matter how much time we have with our people and here to experience life in whatever way, brings you to life, it's never going to seem like enough time, right? Like, I was with Ryan for 10 years. Obviously, that was not enough time. But if I had been with him for like 60 years, which I, hoped like it would be 60, 70 years, that wouldn't have seemed like enough time either.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Oh, I can't, I'm a little nervous for where these hormones are going to have me go here. You already had me once. I'm a little.
I'm used to the tears, and I always say, like, it's okay. Like, we'll take our time through it.
How did you? I can imagine that this having loss like this feels isolating, and especially having a women's community. I do see that women tend to naturally isolate themselves in anything. Like, you have a fight with your husband, you are angry about something, you have loss, right? You isolate, and it feels like a protection. We kind of like go into ourselves, and it feels like protection. Whereas the opposite is true. Like you cannot isolate. You need your people. You need community. It's like saying you've just lost your person. You're better off alone now to deal with it. No, that is exactly the proof that you need more people. You need to find your people to help you. How did that come about for you?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's like after we're in our modern society, after all the rituals are done, like, right, like like when Ryan was in the hospital and up until his celebration of life, it was surrounded by so many people all the time. And then it was like, it literally was overnight. Everybody goes back to their lives and you're just left to pick up the pieces. And that's whenever all those rituals are done and like you're in this very weird stage where, okay, I don't really even know what my purpose is anymore because my purpose for so long was taking care of my husband and making sure he was getting the best medical care. And then when he was on hospice, that he was comfortable while he was transitioning to heaven. It's like you have a purpose and then you just focus on that. And even though it's hard, it's like that's how you get through it because there's like that is the goal, whatever the shitty goal is that it might be.
You have a checklist. You have a to-do list. You have things that need to get done. So it's given you like a compass. It's a map. And you have a map. You're going the way you need to go. And then afterwards, it's like, there's no book for this.
No. And that's why, and that's the time when everybody kind of goes back to their own lives. And that's really when people need the support the most is when everybody else kind of like goes down and goes back to their lives. Because when it gets quiet, like that's when the grace gets really loud. Like that's when the pain is like knocking on your door and being like, okay, we need to start dealing with this new reality. And that is really hard. And so it was like a double-edged sword because I always say it was really hard for that realization that everybody goes back to their lives. But it also like that being able to like show myself how strong I am and how like brave I am to be able to figure this out on my own, like that made me who I am now. Because if I had not crutches, but if I had people that, like living with me that really weren't living with me and I had those extra cushions, and not to say it's wrong or right, and it's probably so amazing to have that. Like I had to figure it out on my own because that's reality. Like it was just me with my boys. Like that's my family. That's my like immediate family in my home that I needed to take care of. And there was no one else that had the responsibility to do that for me.
Yeah. I can imagine also you feel angry. You're feeling angry because you've lost your love. So you're angry. So when people try to help, you're probably just like, just get out of here. You don't even know. Leave me alone. Is that an accurate?
It's like, it's hard. And it's also really nice to have people because, sometimes you don't want to be by yourself with your emotions. And it's a really nice distraction to have other people around you a lot, which I did enjoy that when I was going through that time when Ryan was in the hospital. But then I think after I was grateful to not have to like put on a show all the time because you do feel awkward, especially with people around you. Like if you want to cry or if you just want to like not talk or just like watch TV and zone out, like you can't really do that with a lot of people. So it's like you're kind of masking a lot of the time. So being by myself, having more time to myself was a blessing because I could just be like, do whatever I wanted to do in whatever form. And there was no one to judge me or try to fix it or whatever.
Well, it goes back to that conditioning that women have that we feel like we have to make it better for other people. Like if someone else is sad, we have to make them feel better about it. Or if they feel uncomfortable that we're sad, we have to make them feel better about it. This is exactly one of those things, like I said, that it's like not up to you to do that. Not up to you, but unless you've had, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But unless you've had that kind of work that you've done, your own journey, right? Your own growth, that you know how to set those kind of boundaries where it's not my responsibility to make you feel better.
Yeah.
And then also having, this is ladies, anybody who's listening, think about that. Think about the people who are in your life right now. Think about if a tragedy occurred. Think about who you could just sit and they'd just let you cry. Like, they're not trying to fix you. They're not trying to be like, oh, what can I do to help? They're just like, yeah, you just need to cry. I don't care if it's from a loss. I don't care if it's from postpartum. I don't care if it's from you are mad at your husband, whatever. You should be able to say that the people that you surround yourself with, what's the saying? The 5 people you surround yourself with, right?
Yeah.
Are those people that will allow you to go through these ups and downs and ins and outs without judgment and without trying to change what's happening. Just sit there and be. Hold space. There it is. Hold space.
I love that. Yeah.
So think about that. Think about the people that you have in your life right now that you are trying to please and perform for. Are they the people that would hold space for you in these moments? Because I know when we lost everything, where was everybody? Where were all these people that we were trying to keep up with the Joneses with and going on vacations with? And like, where were they? They were, I mean, I'm not saying that they abandoned us. I'm saying they were dealing with their own stuff. They had to deal with their own. And that's what happens. Like what happened with COVID. We got to look out for us. I got to look out for my little family here. So you want to have the people in your life that are, they're going to look out for their own family, but they're also going to look out for you as well.
Yeah. And, you said something else there is important. It's like, when somebody dies, there's so many people that have grief, right? Like as the widow, I had so much grief that I had to cope and manage with, but like everybody else, like family members and friends, they all have their own grief, but everybody has the responsibility to learn how to carry their grief in their own authentic way. And sometimes that means not being able to have the capacity to like take on someone else's grief that is having like the, grief for the same person. That's really hard. Yeah. So it's like you have to, I say like with my clients, you have to assemble your own team of people that aren't part of like your immediate friends and family, because they're also grieving and they don't have the capacity for your grief just as much as you don't have the capacity for their grief. So like talk to somebody, find a grief therapist or counselor or coach, whatever it might be. Find modality, find activities where you can, get some movement in, get that all these like the energy flowing, whatever it is, if it's anxiousness, if it's fear, like you need to move that around, you need to release it. You can't put everything on other people that are also grieving the same person. It's not good for anybody.
That's so smart. And it seems so obvious, but it's not, because you think about that in moments of tragedy, who do you have around you? The other people that have been affected by the same tragedy. Yeah, but that's so true. That's why it's so important to find coaches and mentors and grieving groups or any group, right? AA, anything. Finding people that will hold space for you to talk it out and be whatever you're going to be. Mad, sad, happy, whatever.
I mean, so working with clients one-on-one for almost 3 years, when like family members or friends that are grieving the same person, when they try to support each other, that's when conflicts happen, because everybody grieves so differently that there's so much miscommunication, and then no one is getting what they need.
Right.
No one, and everybody feels misunderstood, and then it becomes a competition of whose grief is more.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I would imagine. That you're not doing it right. You're not grieving, like saying, what if your mother-in-law was like, you're moving on? How could you move on? How could you date someone? How are you forgetting my son? And it's like, exactly. They have to live too.
Exactly. And it's not that, no matter what the situation is, it's not that anyone is grieving wrong. It's just, it might not work for somebody else. And like their grief is, I just talked about this online and I got flack for it, because it, like, people don't realize that like you are responsible for your grief. No one else is. You owe people respect. You owe them empathy. You owe them kindness, but you don't owe them to have to heal them. Like,
Mhm.
that's not on you. They have to go out and find peace on their own. And then together, hopefully, you guys can both find your peace and acceptance with whatever that you're grappling with, because they're going to be different things. And then you can come together and have like, it's like going to be a new relationship because you're coming from a completely different place, right? You're both coming from, you've gone through hell together, but then you've had to heal separately and then you're coming back together.
Yeah.
What happens a lot of the time is one person might, really lean into the healing work and finding peace, and the other one won't do that. And that's where I see a lot of conflicts happen.
Yeah. Well, it's just like learning tools. It's
Yes.
like anything. It's not even with grief. It's in life. If you are, say, walking a path with someone, you're on the same path, and this person over here is learning how to have healthy boundaries, is learning how
Yes.
to not people please, is learning how to have self-confidence and self-love and self-care and the importance of that. Whereas this person is not. This person, you see it a ton in marriage, in
Yes.
husbands and wives. So there's a men's community that is, my women's community is modeled after. And that actually has come up a lot in the wives saying, my husband was on this journey and he was like bettering himself. And it honestly came out as condescending. Like, I'm doing this work or I'm getting left behind. So there's different how it's being taken, right? It's like either I'm getting left behind or you're condescending to me, like, because I'm not doing the work.
Yeah.
That's exactly that situation. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
What many of my listeners and the women I work with are dealing with lows that are not as dramatic as grief and loss and thankfully, but what would you say the advice to women who are just stuck in their sadness, whatever it is, whatever situation they've found themselves in, they're stuck in this sadness?
Yeah. That you hold the key to being able to move forward, right? There's nothing in your external world. There's not going to be a person. There's not going to be a thing. There's not going to be a therapist. There's not going to be like a yoga class. You have to find the things that are holding you back. So things that are causing you resistance. So whether that's fear, whether that's sadness, whether that's resentment or guilt, whatever it might be. And you have to learn to release it. And knowing that just comes from you, that's giving yourself permission. You have to find permission for yourself to let go of what's holding you back. And no one else is going to do that for you. And then, people are like, well, how do you do that? It's like, you stop obsessing about the things that are making you sad or making you fearful. And you get uncomfortable doing these things, right? Even when they're scary, even when, you're like unsure about yourself, like, you have to get uncomfortable in order to push past all of these like resistance points.
Yeah.
Like if I'm with a client and they're feeling guilty about moving forward because they're like, every time I start to feel happy, I start to feel guilty because my person's not here and they're not able to live. And it's like, you have to give yourself permission to live again and surrender to happiness. Surrender to it. You are not losing your connection to your person. You are not dishonoring them. You are not being disrespectful. You are honoring yourself.
What's hard for me is and again, not just with loss, but when you come to these places with these people, with anybody who's facing this, something that they just can't seem to get out of this stuff. And it's like, you have every excuse. Every excuse will keep you stuck because that's where you're comfortable. That's where you're comfortable. Like I said, going into yourself and isolating in this story of, really a victim. I'm a victim, right? And it's just like anything, like with someone who's been sexually assaulted or abused or had a toxic relationship, anything. It's like, the longer you hold on to this story of being a victim to this, to adult children who treat you poorly, to parents who didn't raise you the way that you think you should have been, if you're holding on to these things, you have to release it. You have
Yeah.
to release it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what else are you going to do? My
Yeah.
husband had one of our friends, he's a therapist on, and he said, if you're not growing, you're dying. In nature,
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
nature, everything, if it's
Yeah.
not growing, it's dying. That's such a powerful visualization for me.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, I mean that it's just so true. People just keep themselves in this cycle, whether it's in grief or whether it's just in their life in general. Like they create, like you said, they create this victim mentality that like I can't have this thing or like I am this way. But it's the behavior, right? It's the habits, it's the mindset. And it's like all of those things can be changed. But you just, like you said, you don't want to get uncomfortable because that's scary. That's being vulnerable. That's the unknown. You have to just jump into the unknown, get uncomfortable over and over and over and over again. And I say that to my grief clients all the time. I'm like, if you're not uncomfortable, you need to, because
Yeah.
that's how you're going to find peace and healing. Because a lot of the time we get so comfortable in the pain that we just sit in it and then we never change. And then we always get stuck in like, okay, well, I'm not getting better and I'm still sad and I'm still crying all day. And it's like, but what are you doing differently?
Yeah.
Nothing. And that's why you're stuck.
Right. In your books, you have all of this, same as just like what we're talking about. You have all of this advice for empowerment. It's a source of comfort for so many. But I'm looping back to when we very first started. Not everybody would take their grief and put it out like this. Not everybody would share their stories. I am an advocate for sharing stories. Like that's this podcast is, if nothing else, please just come share your story, because then if one person hears it, maybe they won't feel so alone. Maybe they won't feel so isolated. I had that experience with postpartum. I heard a
Yeah.
podcast that explained it totally differently than what I had always assumed it was.
Uh-huh.
And it was years before I even experienced it. And because when I was going through it, I had heard this podcast episode, this woman sharing her story. I was like, oh, that's what's happening to me. I could identify it, so it helped me work through it quicker. I knew what was happening, so I identified it. I could work through it. So where were you? What was your headspace when you were like, I am going to write this down. I'm going to tell my story.
Yeah. So it was, I mean, I started thinking about writing my first book. I didn't know the title yet, but my first book, Running in Trauma Citadel, while Brian was dying on hospice. And I was like, no one understands this. Like, because when you're in that space, you're Googling, like, what's it like to be a widow? Like, how do I find happiness after losing a spouse? And it's all like so clinical. And I'm like, nobody talks about this stuff the way that it actually is. So I was like, I'm going to write this. Like, I am going to write this for all the people that feel misunderstood, that feel lost, that they feel like nobody understands what they're going through because there aren't resources that like actually capture the rawness of grief and the complexity of it in a way that is relatable. So that's really what prompted my first book. Is like, I'm just going to retell this story because I feel compelled to. And I want people to know that even after the unimaginable, like there's still beauty in life and there's still hope. And then like the end of my first book is like, basically saying that like this is kind of like the end of Ryan's life, but this is the beginning of my new life. And I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I have hope like in my heart that it will be beautiful. And then my second book is, it takes you through my process of grief after Ryan's death and how I found myself again and my identity and my confidence and how I learned to carry my grief in a way that was sustainable and allowed me to build a life that I love. Um, and then I take you through my love story of finding my second husband, Anthony, and how I've been able to integrate our love together along with my love for Ryan and his memory. And, it really touches on a lot of the things that a lot of grievers go through, like going through a loved one's things and feeling guilt and falling in love after loss if you're a widow, and connecting with your person that's no longer here. And, people's criticisms of, when you're trying to move forward after loss. So a lot of these things, it's like the big topic, but each chapter takes on a topic that is very relevant to grievers. And then I share my personal story, but then also like, this is how you move through this. And these are tips and tools and strategies and mindset shifts to help you. And a lot of the chapters have, like writing prompts to help as well.
Oh, that's so good. I can't wait. I can't wait to read them.
Yeah.
You just led me right into this question. Was anything traumatic like this has a way of reshaping us? Birth has a way of reshaping us. How did you rediscover yourself and your passions?
It felt like it was just, it happened naturally for me because after Ryan died, I did feel this huge calling to help others through this process, knowing that, society as a whole really doesn't know grief very well. So for me, it felt like a calling. This feels like this is why I'm here, like on this earth, is to do this work. And although it really sucks that I had to come to this by losing my husband, like this is it's like, I don't know if you believe in soul contracts, but I do. And it's like, I believe Ryan and I signed up for this. Like we signed
Okay.
up to be together for 10 years. And then we both agreed, okay, like we're going to have 2 beautiful children. And like, it would be his time to go to heaven. And then I would continue on and, do this work that I'm doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. Your story has resonated with so many people who've experienced loss. Is there a particular story or response from a reader or from one of your clients that has stuck with you?
The one that I can think of is, I've been working with a widower and he had lost his wife 3 or 4 years ago, and his comfort zone was in a chair and he couldn't get out of the chair, and he would just sleep there all day because he was so depressed and so sad about losing her. And he's finally able to like get out of the chair and go outside and like decorate his house for the holidays, and like he's taking care of himself and going to doctors. And like before he was cemented, like his grief was literally like the chair was the symbol of his grief and being stuck. And now he's able to live life in a way that he's honoring his grief, but he's also taking care of himself and he's finding joy in life again. Um, and that one, like when he told me that, when he's like, I'm not in the chair anymore. I mean, I'm just like trying to hold back tears. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what, like a symbolic, the most symbolic I can even think of. Because that's what grief is like. It's like you're stuck in something.
Mhm.
And being able to, I mean, it took so much strength for him to be able to get out of that chair. And for anybody going through loss, it takes everything in you to get unstuck and to take steps forward.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's your story is and this is where I wanted to start this, and this is where I want it to wrap up, is it's unimaginable loss. Okay, like it's something that I don't want to ever think about, but I do think about. We all think about it.
Yeah.
And I am so sorry for your loss, but I am so happy for your journey to joy. So, what's one thing that you hope every woman listening today takes away, anyone listening, but women really, takes away and applies to their own lives?
That no matter what you go through in life, the good, the bad, the ugly, that you have the power to, well, empower yourself and to change your life for the better, and that you deserve to live a really beautiful life with the time that you have here. And it really is within your capacity to control that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much. Where can people come find you? Where's the best place for them to come if they're needing your services?
Yeah, so you can find me on all the social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn at Whitney Lynn Allen at Allen. You can find me on my website. It's whitneylynnallen.com. And then again, my book is coming out on March 5th. You can pre-order it now on my website, or also just at any of the book retailers, What Must Be Carried. And then my first book, Running in Trauma Stilettos, is on Amazon.
I'm so excited. I'm excited to read it. And I've already got a couple of people that I'm hoping I can send that to. So they
Awesome.
can start working on their journey through their loss and their grief as well. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing your story, not only here with me and my listeners, but all to everyone, because the work you're doing, absolutely, I do believe in, you called it a soul contract. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard it called that, but I absolutely believe that we have a purpose and that we made a decision for that purpose before we even came here. So I really appreciate that you see it that way as well, and that coaching is a calling and sharing your story is a calling. And I 100% get you on that. And I appreciate the work you're doing. So thank you so much for joining in today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Whitney.